The Dharma talk today is, I think I put this is a talk that I've given, a talk title that I've addressed several times, and is titled, again, Perception Only. Perception Only is a profound teaching of the Yogacara school of Buddhism that goes back, well, the understanding goes back to the time of the Buddha, but the delineation or explanation of it starts to show up quite strongly through the teachings of the Sandhi Nirmacana Sutra, the Lankavatara Sutra, and specifically the teachings of Vasubandhu in the, not really sure, 3rd, 4th century, somewhere in there. So it's a simple statement, perception only. But what it is encouraging you to do, and everyone to do, as a living being, you're a living being. Anybody in here not human? Of course you're not, you wouldn't know, would you? So the emphasis on perception only. Perception, you have 6 sense fields as far as we know. There may be a few more. Sense of touch, sense of taste, smell, sight, sound, thinking, and so on, if there's more. So what's being emphasized as to you as a meditator, as someone who is doing what? Strengthening the awareness. Meditation, the way it is taught here, Shikantaza, the traditional teaching of Soto Zen, going back to ancient China, through Dogen, back to his teacher Rujing in China in the 13th century. Is that everything is just your perception. Don't add. The very first thing that arises in your consciousness, perception, sound before the word sound, smell before the word smell. And then we do what? We make up stuff. I'm smelling a dead fish. I'm hearing a cardinal. And it's not being said that this is wrong, it's just that this takes you into a circularity of thinking, takes you into the thought process that continues to crank out dreams, that continues to crank out imaginary ideas about what? About the cardinal, about the fish, about anything you perceive, including the perception of a self, a solid self, and the perception of a solid other. This is called duality, the Advaita, the simple description. It's, we think, we assume, we just assume that we're here and everything else is over there. Go ahead and do that. The issue or the problem with that is some people, not all, some people can pull that off for a whole 72, 75, 32 years or whatever. They can pull it off. In other words, they can get away with just treating this world as if it's separated and there's someplace you can get and something else you can avoid. Something you can get, desire, something you can avoid. Avoidance could be desire, the desire not to go there. Also it could be shutting down or ignorance, and it could be out and out aggression or trying to destroy the thing that is bothersome or in your way or interfering with your agenda. So the way I like to talk about this is there is an object that we're looking at. You're all looking at me right now, and you actually think you're seeing me. Right now, you're projecting onto me your ideas about me, about this person, this old man, this guy who thinks he knows stuff. So what am I suggesting? Simply put, is to take the perception of this and don't add anything to it. Take the perception of this and don't assume a what? Perceiver of it. Take the perception of this and stay there. Perception only. This is reality. This is you could actually, with your mind, your consciousness, with your Buddha nature, with the awakened truth that you were born with, and that you've been covering up your whole life, and probably many, many lifetimes. The words of the Buddha 2,500 years ago, when he awoke, as far as we know, we don't have any recordings, was that everything is dependently arisen. Nothing comes from its own side as an independent self-entity person. Everything is dependent. So everything you see, everything that moves, everything that enters your sensorium, your sense consciousnesses, is without a self, and it's without an other. And it is dependent on everything else. The simple way I like to talk about it, and I've probably said it dozens if not hundreds of times in different ways, is you can't get here without everything else. Let's just go back to mom and dad, make it simple. Mom and dad, everybody had one, more than likely, except for those of you who are aliens. It's supposed to be funny, not funny. Everybody has mom and dad. They got together at a specific time in a specific place, and if all that had not come together exactly right then you would not be exactly here. Someone might be here, but it wouldn't be you. So reflect on that. Think about, imagine that situation. Go back to that situation when they came together and they fell in love and they conceived you. And then you started out as a little, what do they call those, embryos? Is that close? I know we're not from eggs, but similar. And then you came along, and then all the causes and conditions, here again, dependent origination, all the causes and conditions that pushed you this way, pushed you that way, getting beat up on the playground in the second grade, or beating somebody up on the playground in second grade, or observing somebody get beat up on the playground in second grade. There's three choices right there, and there's probably many, many more, where we've all had different kinds of experiences and how we interacted or reacted or assimilated our experiences starts to seep into color and tint and even dye the very chemical situation that is happening here. And what are we here to do as meditators? If you come in here and you listen to me for another 20 minutes, you're a student of the Buddha. When you leave, you may be something else. You may not be a student. You may go back to learning how to plant mushrooms. Bring me some. So it's not a right and wrong part. Let's just take that out of the proverbial equation and say whatever you're doing is the right and wrong is going too far. Don't do that. Don't do it with anything if you can help it. The whole idea of right, wrong, good, and evil, that's all about getting control of people. As my teacher, Kobun Roshi, who passed away in 2002, said, get your own authority. He didn't say boss people around or convince yourself that your opinions are right. What was he saying? He didn't have to explain it to me. On the other hand, I didn't know what he meant, particularly. But my understanding is it means see what authority, what does it mean to be an authority? What does that actually mean? Does that mean that somebody else gives you the authority? They believe you, they vote for you, Examine that. Spend the next 3 or 4 years thinking about, reflecting on authority. So through the sitting practice of meditation, which when we sit down and like we did here this morning and just do nothing, that's basically all you're doing. It's scheduling you're somewhere in your life to do nothing. And what are you doing? You're sitting here. You might start out as a beginning meditator, holding very still and noticing how crazy your mind is. How it's spinning this way and going that way and dreaming up this and thinking that and judging this and evaluating that, worrying about this, worrying about that. That's called meditation. That's what has to happen if you've been doing this your whole life without ignoring it, and then you decide to start to meditate, then of course you're going to be looking at all the things you've been ignoring. And it may take a few years. This is not a crash course. So to use the concept of perception only, and then look at, use a sense of seeing or sound or whatever one you want, pick one or pick all. And just the perception, and see if you can stop short of anything else. See if that's possible, to just observe what is arising, what's falling away. And one way of saying this is that if you see what this is, you will know what it is. If you see what it is, you won't know what it is. We're not talking about mundane knowledge of the philosopher who has 2 PhDs in this kind of thinking and that kind of thinking and logic and all of that. Not that that's not valuable. But all of that relative thinking cracks apart when it comes to what this is. The wisdom mind doesn't have an identity. And there's nothing you can't oppose wisdom because there isn't anything separate from it. Until you see that, this is not a condemnation of anyone, but until you see that, you'll continue to argue with yourself or fight with yourself or wake up in the middle of the night disturbed about something and then try to tamp it down. You might even be using meditation to tamp down your negative feelings. What do I have to say about that? Knock it off. In other words, be genuine. Feel when the negativity comes up for you, this is your lifetime to just stop fighting yourself. Be genuine. This does not mean that if you feel negativity, that I'm somehow validating you going out and hitting people. Don't say, Sokuzan said I should just be me, so I've decided to kick people. So what am I saying? I'm saying, I'll tell you what I'm saying. I'm saying that when the negativity comes up, don't hook it up to anything. Don't hook it up to your muscles. Don't hook it up to your vocal cords. Don't do anything with it, but just be responsible for it. It's your negativity. Even if it was triggered by someone out here who's upset with you, you've done something wrong, and maybe you did. That's not the point. The point is when that arises, just see the texture of it. Just the texture of the negativity. Because if you add anything to it, you're gone. As it says in the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi, or maybe it's Santokai. Hair's breadth deviation will fail to be the kind of attunement that you need with fundamental reality, what is actually happening right now. If you deviate slightly, don't go anywhere with it. This is called discipline. And it's not about following rules. So back to the perception. I'll do it this way. Here's the perceiver. Here's the perceiver. Okay, let's say it's got eyes. And then here's what's being perceived. I could use another digit, but I think this will work. Hitchhiking. All right. Good job. Doing a really great job. Here's the perceiver. The perceiver is seeing this happen. But what's being emphasized here is, you could say it's kind of between these two. Here's the perceiver, the me or the you or the somebody, and here's what is being perceived. And somewhere between that, without an object and without someone perceiving it, just perception only. Find it. Find it in your meditation, find it in your life, find it in your kitchen, find it in your vegetables. Perception only. Whatever you see, that's it. That's what it says back here in this. I didn't write this up here to be cute. It's not a form of arthritis, ascites. It's what? What is it?
As it is.
As it is. It's just this. It's that simple, and it's that profound, and it's that difficult. You can spend your whole life just trying to find out where this present moment is, and you'll find there is no such thing. Good luck. Just be in the now, man. You know, here, take another hit. Be in the now, be here now. And yes, I'm mocking because it's fun. But someone who is tied up in any kind of drugs or any kind of distraction that takes you away from your wisdom mind, I'm all about helping that person if they come this way. They're not likely to, because they're busy doing whatever they're doing. So this is another thing I would say is work on yourself, do it yourself, do this yourself. Don't worry about other people's neurosis or fixing them or helping them. Unless they ask you. And if they ask, make sure you just respond to what they're asking for. Don't do extra. Like if they say, I hear you meditate. Yeah? Then wait. If they don't say anything more, don't you say anything more. If they say, well, what does that do for you? You might say a number of things. If you meditate very much, you're probably going to say something like, well, it helps me settle down, or keeps me from deceiving myself. Or there could be any number of things for each person. Or you might even say, I'm not sure yet. I've just been doing it because I think I need to slow down. And if they don't ask anything more, then don't offer anything more. Perception only, don't add. Don't do the math, don't do any math at all. I wish I'd have known about that in the 10th grade math class. I would have told her. I'm terrible at math. I can't even count money. You'd think you'd be able to count money. But it starts looking all the same. Have you noticed how 50 and a 20 look the same? That's pretty sneaky. That way just the really observant people make fewer mistakes. Yeah, Sheldon.
If thoughts are perception only, how does that work?
What do you mean?
It's like an object that arises that we create.
Don't do anything with it. If you do nothing with thoughts, as the Tulku, what was his name? Bardo Tulku. Matt Willis, who lives over in Kalamazoo, his teacher, Bardo Tulku, said, if you do nothing to thoughts, they will do nothing to you. That kind of a statement comes out of many, many, many years of practicing and understanding what thoughts are. It's a very profound, very simple statement. If the thoughts arise, don't do anything with them, no matter what they are. Have you noticed how whatever you think, you either try to push it away, or you fluff it up and try to add to it, or you explain it, or you try to get rid of it? It's just like a shopping mall.
What do you mean by no present moment?
It's a concept. A present moment means that there are moments that aren't present. And anytime you make any statement, you set up its opposite. But just like if I say perception only, I set up its opposite. No perception only. Anytime you
So include both.
don't do anything with it. I mean, including is a way of practicing, so, and I recommend that to people, so especially when people are having trouble, they're trying to push things away, or they're trying to be selective about how they're functioning, about these people are okay, but these people aren't so good, or these thoughts are okay. Just like the whole, I'm not going to go into politics, that's not my job here, but that whole situation has been going on for not only decades, but centuries. People are always trying to rule other people. And then there's a little lineage here and there of people who just want to see what this is. They just want to understand, what does it mean? We only live so long. What are you going to do with your life? If you only have so much time to live and you know that it could end tomorrow or 50 years from now, what would be the most important thing? As they say sometimes, if you're going to die tomorrow, what would you do? What would I do? I'm already dead, yes?
You mentioned experiences tinting, coloring, and dyeing. How is that also like a river flowing?
Which is exactly that way. The river goes this way, goes that way, fish show up, they go away, the leaves drop down into it. It's just moving. The ancient teaching that Buddhism ran into when it came to ancient China was a Tao. Taoism means the way. And it's just a very simple, based on the teachings of Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu. So it's just the way. It's just, things are just flowing. They just occur. They show up and they vanish. And if you have no preferences, then you're good. But if you start to prefer based on hope and fear, based on loss or gain, or better or worse, or some kind of grasping or passion, or craving something else that you can't have, or wishing that something would go away that you do have, then that creates more tension. Then we add something else onto that, then we go to war with that. More.
A river is never the same twice, so how is something that is dyed and receives impressions never the same twice?
Doesn't matter. Those are just concepts.
What's important to see then?
Perception only. It's not even a river. There's no one perceiving the river. This is we're getting into the basic teachings of the Mahayana Buddhism, which is emptiness, or shunyata. Things are empty of what we think of it. Anything that you see something, you will come up with ideas about it. And the teachings are saying that everything you see is empty of your opinion about it, to put it simply, no matter what it is.
You said everything that shows up is a lie. Then what is true?
Things that aren't lies are true. Who is it says that on South Park? You know.
No, it's Ralph. Or, yeah, The Simpsons.
Nelson.
Nelson.
Yeah.
Nelson.
I knew I was quoting someone.
Very wise.
Famous person. So, and this is not to dismiss your thinking process. It's, you know, you're thinking about something in the appropriate way to track something down, and there's plenty of time to do that. But what we're talking about here is just trying to see what this fundamentally is, using this conceptual teaching of perception only, or just the perception of it, just this. And that's difficult because as soon as anything happens, we have an idea about it. We think like you're looking at me and projecting on me different ideas about me or about what I'm saying, or some people might be thinking I'm a fool. Some people might be thinking I'm know what I'm talking about, or I'm a great teacher. I'm sure there's a lot of those out there. You know, but I'm just saying there's all kinds of ideas and opinions arise, and they're both true and untrue. There's probably something going on with anything that comes up. But fundamentally, that's That's enforcing, that's going away from the perception itself, from the immediacy of the perception. The other thing I would say is this has to be realized. It isn't something that that anyone can just kind of think about, and you can't just think your way into this. You have to actually do it through your awareness practice. Kevin?
I've heard you said in meditation instruction, when we notice that we're sort of daydreaming, not to do anything with
Not
it,
to do.
but to observe.
Yes.
So when I'm kind of invested in daydreaming and then I notice that that's happened, how do you transition to just observing without saying like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm daydreaming?
We just look at the, sorry, I'm daydreaming. Just look at that part of it then. So always back up a quarter of an inch and be an observer. Don't buy into anything. Don't let your mind sell you a bunch of goods on anything. So the important thing, the important idea here is, and it's not an easy one, is don't believe it and don't disbelieve it. So don't accept, believe, validate anything, and don't disbelieve, reject, or devalue anything. Just this. And then anything that needs to show up will, anything that needs to leave will. You get very good at saying hello and goodbye. More? There are some, some Trungpa Rinpoche in early years taught Shini and Laktang, or Shamatha Vipassana, or mindfulness awareness. He taught it in stages. And I teach it all at once. So, whereas in shamatha practice, there's the idea of maintaining a meditator, he or she who is watching the breath, and something comes up and you label that thinking and you return to the breath. You keep kind of boycotting the thinking process. I don't teach that, even though I practiced it and taught it for 25, 30 years.
I feel like that's what's coming up for me, is that training. And so I'm trying to do this practice, and those old habits of like, let that thought go, and then come back to what's actually going on.
Don't do anything.
Right.
Don't say right. Don't go. You see what I'm saying? I'm saying as soon as if I say something, and this happens with everyone in conversation, when you're having a conversation with someone, watch everything that's happening, because everything is communication, body language. And so when I'm saying that, I don't mean to be impolite to you, but look where I'm sitting. I'm supposed to teach up here, and I tend to do it. When I get down from here, wander around in the garden, you can probably say anything you want. But up here, I'm saying, don't add. And so when something shows up, just your agreement is adding. Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, I see what you mean. No, you don't. I get to add, you don't.
I'm resisting the urge to nod my head.
All right. I like that. That's very good. Yeah.
On what Kevin said, if he was trained in shamatha practice and maybe was trained to identify thinking and drop it or whatever.
Label thinking, return to the breath.
So what's the difference between that and don't add?
Because you can't help but add. But if I say don't add, then you'll see how much you add. You'll see it, and you'll see there'll be some areas where you might be able to back off and some areas where you can't. It's just it's a very simple process. And so we need to say something. So I would say don't add extra things. But if you do add extra things, don't add things to that to make it even more. I shouldn't add. It takes a while. 20, 30 years maybe. Yes, Sheldon.
So if you label thinking and return to the breath, does that stop you from seeing?
No, and if you come to me, if you're being trained that way, I'm not going to disagree with that. If someone is watching here that is not a student of mine that is practicing in Shambhala or any of the other lineages that teach this is not incorrect. So I'm fine with that. Some people that are, depends on what you're going through. Sometimes I actually have individuals practice in that way. Not very many, but some that need to have more of a kind of an artificial stabilizer because of what they're going through. So it's a pretty good broad teaching. I can understand why the Vidyadhara taught it that way. So it's not a problem. But I would say insofar as you can, and even in that teaching, even the Shambhala teaching, I think it's a level 5 Shambhala training, they tell you to drop everything. Well, I'm telling you to drop it now. I mean, why not start now? And then what? Then you find your own level. You start at the top and fall down to whatever level of control. You may need to do sometimes I have people count their breath 1 to 10 for, maybe 10, 15 cycles, and then stop doing that in order to actually just be here. If a person's really having a lot of distress, emotionally, physically, or whatever, might use a little bit of an artificial training wheels. Yes,
You mentioned earlier that everything is communication.
Yes.
So if two people are interacting and everything is communication, but we're endeavoring to not interpret, say, body language, how does that function as communication?
It's functioning fine. Just like you described it. You're just there and you see what happens, but you don't necessarily put your 2 cents worth on top of it. This is what something happens. Here's something happening, and when you have a thought about it, what it is, you cover up what's there. So the communication needs to be allowed to develop, and it may not be in the form of information. But with the fundamental communication that we all need to receive, if you want to stop suffering, is nothing is separate, and to begin to stop putting out a lot of things and receive. The misunderstood form, or the sometimes ignored form of generosity, is the receiving part. Receive this world. This world is giving you everything. You were given this body. You don't know how you got here. Receive. Really.
What do you mean when you say you're already dead?
Well, there isn't anything else to do. So I don't really want anything. I don't even want to be alive. I mean, if it's not nihilism, I'm not thinking, I'm not saying, well, if I started to die, I wouldn't go to the doctor. I'm not stupid. But I say there's no, as there was just years ago, where there was a big struggle going on. It's not happening anymore. So it's just a way of saying it. It just means that if things go this way, if suddenly you decide that you want to move away from here, and you want to live on the farm where you work. I mean, you follow me? Or if Unyo falls in love with the guy selling can openers down the road, I mean, mechanical can opener. You follow me? I mean, it's like kind of being silly, but I'm just saying if things go haywire and don't, I have expectations, but they're pretty flimsy. I didn't create this. This just grew up because I didn't get in its way. That's why there's a monastery here. I didn't years ago think I need a monastery. It grew up because people want to know how to work with their suffering. So this place just developed. So dead is a good. It's like not particularly objecting or agreeing with anything. Like, how content a dead person is. I'm just like.
You look so peaceful.
Huh?
You look so peaceful.
Like that? Yeah. So it's just a way of talking. Trungpa Rinpoche said that. I don't say that very often, but it's workable to say that occasionally. Question. Then we gotta go to Daily Garden.
Earlier you said when something arises, stop short of adding to that or identifying it.
Yeah.
So if the tendency to identify is also conditioned and choiceless, how can you stop?
This is why this sitting practice of meditation, sitting down and stretching, sharpening, like the image I use, it works for some people and maybe not for others, but it's like if you likened prajna, or the penetrating wisdom of prajna that goes deeply into things and sees what everything is, if that isn't sharpened, then it tends to not cut very well, and it's like trying to cut carrots with a butter knife. You can do it, but you gotta hit it with a hammer, to cut through it. So the idea there is, sitting meditation is like sitting still, doing nothing. It's just like you take the knife away from the vegetables and you just sharpen it on the stone. Boring. Knife is bored to death. Probably a stone isn't too happy either. But you're sharpening. So maybe not much will happen on the cushion, but if boredom begins to happen, that means you're giving up on entertainment. That way when you come back into your meditation action, then there's a sharper seeing. You as a person may not think of yourself as being sharper. So it's not about a credential for the ego to feel like a smarter, sharper, more wise person. It's just less warfare going on. Yes?
That was helpful, because it seems that the only difference between meditation and not is you're not hooking your body up to what your thoughts are doing.
That's very good, yeah. Yeah, if you're holding really still and you're thinking, the neighbor suddenly starts up their lawnmower right outside your door, and you think, yeah, just when I wanted to meditate. But you could sit there and include that. You could make that your meditation, listening to the lawnmower and imagining where the lawnmower is at. That's anytime you're observing anything in meditation or post meditation, anytime that you're just looking at it, you won't know what it is. You won't even know if it's green or not. Yes?
Could you describe prajna for us in a way?
Prajna is the Sanskrit word that's the sixth of the six paramitas, transcendent approaches to awakening, and it's the wisdom which is crossed over. It's crossed over between this and that. It sees beyond the duality that has all of us hoodwinked or fooled into thinking there's somewhere to get and there's somewhere to leave and there's something to ignore. So if you're not hooked into any of that, you're prajnified. That's a new word.
Is it fair to apply a metaphor to understand prajna?
Using the blade again, it's a two-edged sword is the metaphor. It has a blade and it's wielded by the figure by the name of Manjushri, who was we don't know if there was really a Manjushri or not. Doesn't matter. But Manjushri, when that sword goes through the air, it cuts both ways. It cuts no self, no other. So we're right back to perception only. There's just the sword.
Are you sure?
Am I what? I'm not sure of anything. We have to stop. I'm sure we have to stop. Thank you so much.
So we'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of the blue chant books. Would also like to encourage everybody, we do have donation boxes in the hallway, and you can donate online if you value these teachings. Please help us. Thank you.
May the air of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi shiru shi songu sa moko sa moko hoja. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the 10 directions of the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.